For most of human history, we were not the hunters. We were prey. Millions of years ago, before cities, before farming, before metal, before writing, our ancestors walked through landscapes that were actively trying to kill them. Not metaphorically, literally. The Africa of 2 million years ago was not a romantic savanna. It was a battlefield. Tall grass concealed predators. Rivers hid crocodiles. Trees sheltered snakes. The ground itself could cut, infect, poison, and we were small. Early hominins were not physically impressive. They did not have claws. They did not have fangs. They did not have armor. They did not run particularly fast. They did not see well at night. They were edible. That is where our story begins. Hunger came first. Not invention, not tools. Hunger. The earliest hominins survived primarily as opportunistic foragers. They did not dominate landscapes. They scavenged them, fruits when in season, tubers dug from dry ground, insects pried from bark. Occasionally, scraps left behind by larger predators. Imagine approaching a carcass that a lion had just abandoned. You do not own it. You borrow it, quickly, before hyenas arrive, before the lion returns, before vultures signal your presence. This required timing, awareness, risk calculation. Early humans learned to read the landscape not as scenery, but as a living map of threats. Bird flight patterns, scent in the air, sound of grass shifting, silence where there should be noise. Silence often meant predator. Snakes were constant. Africa hosts some of the most venomous species on Earth. Black mambas, puff adders, cobras. Early humans walked barefoot. Every step was a gamble. Venom does not negotiate. One misstep meant paralysis, and paralysis meant death. Not just from poison, but from what came next, because predators follow weakness. How did they survive that? Awareness, pattern recognition. Children learned early what shapes meant danger. The curve of a branch that was not a branch, the coiled shadow, the unnatural stillness. Human fear of snakes is not cultural, it is ancient, burned into perception by millions of years of selection. Then came larger predators, lions, leopards, hyenas, saber-toothed cats. Some of these animals specialized in hunting primates. Our ancestors slept lightly, probably in trees at first, later on elevated ground. Sleep was never deep. Deep sleep could be fatal. Even when we began walking upright consistently, that posture was not dominance. It was surveillance. Standing taller meant seeing further above grass. Seeing further meant surviving another hour. Food was not abundant. Meat was rare early on. Plant foods required knowledge. Which tubers were safe? Which berries were toxic? Which leaves were medicinal? Trial and error in that world was expensive. One poisonous plant could wipe out a small band. So knowledge became survival currency, and knowledge had to be transmitted. This is where social structure matters.
This plant is safe.
A lone
it has
hominid
broad leaves,
does not
but
survive
this one is
long.
dangerous.
A
It
group
has sharp
does.
spikes.
Groups
Remember this
shared
difference. It will
memory
keep you alive.
replaced instinct in many cases. Where to find seasonal fruit, when certain insects swarm. Where water remains during drought. Droughts were devastating. Without wells or storage, water dictated migration. Groups followed shrinking rivers, crowded at watering holes. Watering holes attract predators. The most dangerous place to drink is also the only place to survive. This tension defined early human life. Now consider terrain: rocky escarpments, sharp stone, open plains with little cover, dense woodland with low visibility. Each landscape demanded different strategies. Open plains required group cohesion. Dense forests required heightened hearing. Rivers required caution. Every environment punished mistakes. Weather compounded everything. Heat exhaustion kills silently. Sun exposure damages skin and dehydrates. Cold nights without fire meant huddling for warmth. Rain meant infection. Cuts did not heal easily. Infections were silent killers. Before antibiotics, a simple wound could turn septic, swelling, fever, weakness, and then collapse. Some survived infections. That means early humans likely experimented with plants that reduced inflammation or infection. We know from later ethnographic parallels that many traditional societies use bark, leaves, and roots with antibacterial properties. It is likely our ancestors learned the same way. Observation. Which plants animals eat when sick? Which leaves reduce swelling?
This plant is safe.
Which
It has
resins
broad leaves,
protect wounds?
but this one is dangerous.
Medicine
It has
did not
sharp
begin
spikes.
as theory.
Remember
It
this
began
difference.
as desperation.
It will keep you alive.
Then came tools. The earliest stone tools date back over 3 million years. Simple flakes struck from stone, sharp edges where there were none before. With a sharp stone, a carcass becomes accessible. Without it, thick hide defeats you. Stone changed access to calories. Calories changed brain development. Brain development changed everything else. But tools also changed defense. A stick is not impressive. A sharpened stick is. A thrown stone extends your reach. Distance matters. Predators rely on proximity. Distance equalizes. A group of early humans throwing stones can deter even large carnivores. Not always, but sometimes. Sometimes is enough. Children were the most vulnerable. Protecting the young required vigilance. Groups likely formed protective circles at night. Infants kept central, adults outward-facing. Sound detection was critical. Many primates screamed to alert group members. Early humans likely retained strong vocal alarm systems. Alarm calls mean seconds of preparation. Seconds mean survival. Coordinated defense improved, not through size, through numbers. A lone human is weak. 10 humans with stones are formidable. Cooperation became weapon. This is the pattern you see again and again in early human survival. We did not win because we were stronger. We won because we were. And even then, barely. Fire changed everything. But fire was not invented overnight. Lightning likely ignited grasslands long before humans controlled flame. At first, fire was something to avoid. Wildfires kill indiscriminately. But eventually, someone stayed near a dying flame. Someone realized warmth persists after lightning. Someone fed it. Fire offers light at night. Predators hesitate before flame. Smoke deters insects. Cooking makes tough meat digestible. Cooking unlocks calories. Unlocked calories feed brains. Brains create strategy. Fire extended day into night. Night had always belonged to predators. Now it belonged partially to us. But controlling fire is fragile. It must be maintained, transported, protected from rain. Fire is both gift and burden. If it goes out, you start over, if you can. In some regions, early humans may have carried embers for miles. That alone changes migration patterns. Weapons evolved gradually. Stone flakes became hand axes. Hand axes became multi-purpose tools. Sharper edges meant cleaner cuts. Cleaner cuts meant less energy wasted. Later, spears appear. Evidence suggests wooden spears existed hundreds of thousands of years ago. Thrusting spears first, later throwing spears. Every extension of reach reduces risk. Risk never vanished. Even into relatively recent prehistory, humans were frequently injured by animals. Our skeletons tell that story. Bite marks, fractures, healed trauma. Survival was constant negotiation. Then there were creatures we no longer face. Giant hyenas larger than modern ones. Massive crocodiles. Megafauna capable of crushing bone effortlessly. Even herbivores could kill. An enraged buffalo does not care about your intelligence. Early humans had to calculate constantly. Approach, avoid, climb, hide, run. That mental calculation was survival itself. This is the raw truth. For millions of years, humanity was not guaranteed. We survived because each generation learned slightly faster, adapted slightly better, connected slightly stronger. The world did not want us here. The fact that you exist means millions of small victories accumulated, tiny advantages layered over time. Food knowledge, snake recognition, medicinal experimentation, fire control, weapon shaping, child protection, predator defense, terrain reading, cooperation. Each alone is not enough. Together, they become resilience. And for most of prehistory, night belonged to something else. Darkness was not peaceful. It was predatory. When the sun dropped below the horizon, early humans did not relax. They compressed inward, voices lowered, movement slowed, eyes strained. The dark erased distance, and without distance, humans are vulnerable. Lions hunt best at dusk. Leopards prefer the cover of shadow. Hyenas move confidently in darkness. Snakes cool into stillness, almost invisible against rock. Before fire, night reduced humanity to waiting, waiting for dawn, waiting to see who was missing. Fire was not invented, it was stolen. Lightning struck dry grass long before humans understood combustion. Wildfires swept across savannas with terrifying speed. Animals fled. Smoke choked the air. The ground glowed with heat long after flames moved on. Most creatures avoided the burn zone, but early humans learned something different. Where fire passed, predators hesitated. Charred land exposed carcasses. Cooked flesh required less chewing. Ash-covered ground reduced insects. Fire cleared dense underbrush, improving visibility. At some point, we do not know exactly when, a group did not flee. They approached, carefully, fearfully, but with curiosity. This was the moment that separated us from every other species. Not strength, curiosity. A branch caught flame and did not immediately consume itself. It glowed. It radiated heat. It moved when carried. Someone held it longer than instinct allowed. That hesitation rewrote history. The first controlled fires were fragile. They required constant tending. A single rainstorm could erase progress. But once controlled, fire altered the hierarchy of the night. Predators that once approached silently now paused at the glow. Even large carnivores are cautious around flame. The crackling sound signals unpredictability. Smoke irritates lungs and eyes. Heat radiates outward in warning. For the first time in millions of years, humans could hold ground after sunset. Night did not disappear, but it shrank. Around fire, shadows retreated. Faces became visible. Communication improved. Storytelling may have emerged here, not for entertainment, but for survival memory. Firelight extended social learning into nighttime. Knowledge transmission doubled in duration. That alone accelerated survival. Raw meat is energy. Cooked meat is accessible energy. Cooking breaks down tough fibers. It neutralizes many parasites. It reduces chewing time dramatically. Chimpanzees chew for hours per day. Humans chew far less. That time was redirected into thinking, into planning, into shaping stone. Cooking did something else profound. It made certain plants edible that would otherwise be toxic. Tubers with defensive chemicals soften under heat. Seeds become digestible. Calories increase, and calorie density supports larger brains. The human brain is metabolically expensive. It consumes disproportionate energy relative to body size. Without cooking, maintaining that brain would be nearly impossible. Fire did not just provide warmth. It rewired our biology. Stone tools existed before fire mastery, but heat treated stone fractures more predictably. At some point, humans realized that placing stone near fire altered its properties, heated rock flakes more precisely, edges sharpened more cleanly. This was not accidental. This was experimentation. Experimentation requires foresight. You damage some stone to improve others. You accept short-term loss for long-term gain. That mindset marks a shift. Early tools were simple flakes. Then came hand axes, symmetrical, balanced, portable. A hand axe is not just sharp, it is reusable. It can butcher, cut wood, defend, dig. Carrying one meant preparedness. Preparedness reduces panic, and panic kills. The spear was a turning point. At first, likely thrusting spears. Long wooden shafts hardened in fire. Fire not only provided light, it strengthened wood. A sharpened tip exposed to flame becomes tougher, harder, more durable. With a spear, a human no longer needs to grapple with prey. Distance enters the equation. Later, throwing spears appear. This is radical. Now the human can strike without entering immediate danger. This altered hunting strategies dramatically. Instead of waiting for scavenging opportunities, early humans began to create them. But hunting large animals was never clean. Many early skeletons show trauma consistent with close-range encounters. Broken ribs, fractured arms, healed skull injuries. Hunting megafauna was not cinematic. It was violent and often costly. Yet calories from large prey could feed entire groups, which increased survival rates, which allowed population growth. And population is power. It is important to understand something uncomfortable. Predators were not static. They adapted. Lions learned to avoid fire. Hyenas, obus. Hyenas observed human patterns. Leopards targeted isolated individuals. The arms race was mutual. Survival was dynamic. Humans that underestimated predators did not survive to pass on genes. Fear remained necessary. Even as fire pushed darkness back, vigilance never disappeared. Human infants are unusually vulnerable. Compared to many animals, they are born underdeveloped. They require years of protection. That extended dependency created both weakness and advantage. Weakness because infants slow groups down. Advantage because extended childhood increases learning
This plant
capacity.
is safe. It has broad leaves.
Protecting young
But this one is
required
dangerous.
coordination.
It has
Evidence from modern foraging societies suggests that adults form protective perimeters. Mutations may have emerged early. Someone awake, someone listening. Infants likely slept closest to fire. Warmth stabilizes fragile bodies. The survival of children was not guaranteed. Infant mortality in prehistoric populations was extremely high. Every child that reached adulthood represented a victory over environment, which meant parenting was not sentimental, it was strategic. Every adult understood that protecting young meant preserving the group, and preserving the group meant preserving knowledge. Knowledge is lineage. Venomous snakes posed constant threat. Early humans likely learned to identify venomous species through pattern recognition, bright coloration, head shape, behavior. Trial and error here was lethal, but observation extended beyond avoidance. Certain plant compounds reduce inflammation. Some resins seal wounds. Charcoal can absorb toxins. Ethnobotanical parallels suggest early humans experimented with crushed leaves and bark for wound treatment. There is no written record, but survival implies adaptation. Healed skeletons show individuals living years after severe injury. That suggests care. Care requires knowledge, and knowledge requires memory. Humans expanded beyond Africa eventually, into colder climates. different predators, different plants, different risks. Cold nights without fire are deadly. Fire became essential, not optional. Clothing emerged, likely animal hides processed with stone scrapers. Shelters improved. Caves were not homes by preference. They were strategic choices. Elevation, limited entrances, defensible, wind protected. Harsh terrain filtered out the unprepared. Only groups that adapted quickly survived migrations. Migration was not adventure. It was pressure, droughts, resource depletion, competition. Moving into new territory meant encountering new dangers, new snakes, new diseases, new animals unfamiliar with human behavior. Each migration wave required recalibration. Adaptability was not luxury, it was necessity. To modernize, prehistoric predators can feel mythic. Giant short-faced bears, massive hyenas, saber-toothed cats, enormous crocodiles. Some weighed as much as small cars. Facing such creatures with wooden spears seems absurd. Yet humans did, and sometimes they lost. The fossil record shows coexistence with megafauna that no longer exist. Their extinction is complex, but human pressure likely played a role. Once humans mastered coordinated hunting and fire, large animals faced a new kind of predator. One that strategized, one that cooperated, one that altered landscapes with flame. Burning sections of grassland drives prey into open visibility. Fire becomes tool not just for warmth, but for hunting. This is not dominance. It is leverage. Even with fire and weapons, hunger remained constant. Prehistoric life was not steady abundance. It was cycles: feast, famine, drought, plenty. Fat reserves mattered. Sharing food mattered. Groups that hoarded internally collapsed. Groups that distributed survived. Social trust became survival tool. You share today. You receive tomorrow. This reciprocal system stabilized uncertainty. It also created moral codes. Even before formal language, fairness likely influenced cohesion. A group that fractures internally becomes vulnerable externally. Here is the truth rarely emphasized. Human survival was statistical. Many groups disappeared. Extinction was common. We are descendants of the successful branches. But for every surviving lineage, countless others ended. Crushed by drought, consumed by predators, starved during migration, killed by infection. Our existence is not proof of inevitability. It is proof of accumulation. Small advantages compounded. Fire, tools, cooperation, memory, curiosity, adaptation. None guaranteed survival alone. Together, they tipped probability. And probability over millions of years becomes destiny. But not certainty. Never certainty. By the time early humans mastered fire and sharpened stone, the world had not become safe. It had become complicated. Because survival is not just about outrunning predators. It is about surviving what you cannot see. Infection, starvation, internal conflict, poison, weather shifts, and something even more dangerous, despair. In prehistoric life, a cut was not minor. A small gash from stone, a thorn puncture in the foot, a bite from an animal, even a splinter. In our world, it heals quietly. In theirs, it could become fatal. Without antibiotics, bacteria entered easily. Swelling, heat, pus, fever, weakness, then the slow collapse. Many early humans died not from dramatic predator attacks, but from infection. Yet skeletal remains show something extraordinary. Healed fractures, repaired skull injuries, missing limbs survived for years. This means something powerful. They cared. An injured individual cannot hunt, cannot gather efficiently, cannot defend themselves. If early humans were purely selfish survivalists, the injured would be abandoned. But they were not. Care emerged as strategy. Protecting the injured preserved knowledge, experience, memory of seasons, memory of terrain, memory of medicinal plants. Keeping elders alive meant keeping survival information intact. Compassion was not softness, it was evolutionary advantage. Early humans did not understand bacteria, but they understood outcomes. Certain leaves reduced swelling, certain barks eased pain, certain resins sealed wounds. Charcoal can bind toxins, clay can draw infection. Observation became pharmacology. Animals were teachers. Chimpanzees chew specific plants when ill. Some ungulates seek mineral-rich soil when sick. Early humans watched, experimented, failed, learned. Knowledge passed orally long before writing. The first doctors were not scholars. They were desperate survivors. Medicine began not as science, but as memory. Venomous snakes remained constant threats. Even with better awareness, risk never vanished. The fear response humans feel toward snakes is not superstition. It is neurological inheritance. The human brain processes snake-like shapes faster than many other visual stimuli. That speed saved lives. Imagine a child stepping into grass. An adult sees movement, pulls them back. Reaction time matters. Some bites were survived, some were not. But communities learned which habitats were higher risk, which times of day were dangerous. Behavior adjusted. Fear refined behavior. Behavior preserved life. Leopards specialize in ambush. They prefer isolated prey. Even today, leopards occasionally attack humans. In prehistory, we were softer targets. Children and smaller adults were vulnerable. This required vigilance beyond physical defense. It required psychology. Early humans likely developed strong attachment bonds. Parents hyper-aware of distance. Groups that allowed children to wander freely did not persist. Protectiveness became instinct. This may explain something profound about humanity. Our intense emotional bonds. The anxiety when a child is out of sight. The instinct to gather close at night. These are not modern neuroses. They are ancient survival echoes. Starvation was not rare. It was cyclical. Drought reduced plant availability. Migration of herds disrupted hunting patterns. In harsh winters, food vanished beneath snow. Humans learned to diversify diet. Insects became protein. Roots became staples. Bone marrow was extracted from carcasses. Even brains were consumed for fat content. Nothing was wasted. Waste is luxury. Luxury did not exist. Some groups likely practiced food sharing beyond immediate family. Those that did survived droughts better. Reciprocity became survival system. This is where trust evolved into something deeper. Trust becomes insurance. If you share when you have excess, you are protected when you do not. This social web strengthened resilience. When confronted by predators, panic kills. Coordination saves. There is evidence from ethnographic parallels that humans form defensive circles when threatened. Children in the center, adults facing outward, weapons ready. This formation minimizes weak points. It is simple. It is effective. It is cooperative. Even large predators hesitate when prey does not scatter. Scattering signals weakness. Standing together signals resistance. This behavioral shift marks an evolutionary milestone. Humans began using unity as shield, not speed, not claws, unity. Over time, tools refined. Stone points attached to wooden shafts using plant fibers and resin adhesives. This is engineering. Composite tools require planning multiple materials together. Resin heated to bind. Fibers twisted to secure. Stone shaped precisely. This is no longer opportunistic scavenging. This is preparation. Foresight separates humans from immediate reactive species. With better spears came better hunting. With better hunting came surplus. Surplus allowed specialization. Some individuals could focus more on tool-making, others on plant gathering. Division of labor increased efficiency. Efficiency increased survival margins. Margins reduce extinction risk. Humans spread into colder climates, into Ice Age Europe, into high altitudes, into dense forests. Each environment punished different weaknesses. Cold climates demanded insulation. Animal hides sewn with bone needles appear later in the archaeological record. Sewing requires fine motor control, design, planning. Clothing allowed expansion into environments previously lethal. Fire alone was insufficient. Clothing turned human skin from liability into adaptable surface. In mountainous terrain, endurance mattered. In forests, hearing mattered. In tundra, planning mattered. The groups that adapted survived. Those that did not vanished. We are the product of repeated filtering. There is something less visible but equally critical. Courage, not recklessness. Calculated risk. Hunting large prey required approaching danger deliberately. Fear had to be managed. Too little fear meant death. Too much fear meant starvation. Emotional regulation became survival trait. This may explain why humans are uniquely capable of suppressing immediate fear when necessary. We override instinct through planning. Planning is survival advantage. Language likely accelerated this dramatically. The ability to warn, to coordinate complex strategies, to describe unseen threats. Language turned memory into shared blueprint, and shared blueprints increase group coherence. Humans did not only fight animals. At some point, humans fought humans. Competition over territory, over water, over migration paths. Conflict introduced new risks, but it also refined defensive strategies. Tribal boundaries may have emerged from necessity. Protecting resources required coordination. This is not romantic. It is brutal. Prehistory was not peaceful utopia. It was tension, layered over scarcity. Yet even in conflict, cooperation within groups intensifies. External threat strengthens internal bonds. This pattern continues today. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Humanity nearly vanished multiple times. Genetic bottlenecks suggest that at certain points, our population may have dropped to only a few thousand breeding individuals. Climate events, volcanic eruptions, resource collapses, small populations are fragile. A single drought can erase entire lineages. The fact that we survived those bottlenecks is not proof of superiority. It is proof of adaptability, and perhaps luck. Luck is rarely acknowledged in survival narratives, but luck matters. Right migration at right time, right innovation before drought, right alliance between groups. Luck interacts with preparation. Preparation increases survival odds, but it never guarantees. When we say monsters, we do not mean myth. We mean megafauna that towered over humans, woolly rhinoceroses, short-faced bears larger than modern grizzlies, giant hyenas capable of crushing bone. These creatures were apex predators. Humans faced them with fire and spears. Sometimes they won. Often they retreated. Avoidance was as valuable as confrontation. Intelligence means knowing when not to fight. That restraint saved lives. Not strength, not speed, not size, but accumulation of small advantages. Awareness of snakes, memory of drought cycles, plant-based medicine, fire maintenance, weapon innovation, defensive formations, child protection, food sharing, adaptability to terrain, emotional regulation, cooperation, curiosity. By now, early humans had fire. They had tools. They had weapons. They had medicine, primitive, but real. They had defensive formations. They had emotional bonds strong enough to protect children for years. And still, none of that guaranteed survival. Because many species had strength. Many species had teeth. Many species adapted to terrain. But only one lineage survived. Hours. So, what was the difference? It was not muscle. Neanderthals were stronger. It was not endurance alone. Many animals outrun us. It was not claws. We never had them. The defining advantage was networked intelligence, not individual intelligence, collective intelligence. A lone human is fragile. A connected group of humans is exponentially stronger. What early hominids developed, slowly, imperfectly, was the ability to share knowledge across generations and across groups. Memory stopped dying with individuals. It began traveling. That changed everything. Before structured language, communication was limited. Gestures, sounds, expressions, useful, but narrow. As language developed, survival accelerated. You could describe a snake without someone being bitten. You could describe a drought before it arrived. You could describe a hunting strategy before executing it. Language turned experience into transferable survival code. And once survival code spreads, extinction risk drops. Because one group's mistake does not have to be repeated by another. Mistakes become lessons. Lessons become culture. Culture becomes advantage. Curiosity saved us once when someone approached fire, but curiosity became systematic. Why do certain plants heal wounds? Why do herds migrate earlier this year? Why did the river dry faster than before? Why did some tools break and others endure? Asking why increases adaptation speed. Other animals adapt biologically over generations. Humans adapt behaviorally within one generation. That speed matters during climate swings, and climate swung violently during prehistory. Ice ages expanded and retreated. Rainfall patterns shifted. Vegetation zones moved hundreds of miles. Species that could not migrate fast enough vanished. Humans did migrate, relentlessly, across continents, across land bridges, into deserts, into frozen tundra. Migration is risky, but stagnation is fatal. The willingness to move was survival. Many animals cooperate within family groups. Humans cooperated beyond kin. Bands merged, alliances formed, knowledge exchanged. This created larger social webs. Larger webs stabilize survival. If one region suffers drought, another may not. If one group fails, others persist. Network size correlates with resilience. Small, isolated populations vanish easily. Connected populations persist. This is why population size matters so profoundly in human evolution, and why bottlenecks nearly ended us. But every time, cooperation expanded again. Other animals respond to immediate stimuli. Humans began planning seasons ahead, stockpiling tools, anticipating migration routes, preparing shelters before winter. Planning requires imagination. Imagination requires abstraction. Abstraction allows hypothetical thinking. What if? What if the herd does not return? What if drought lasts longer? What if predators learn our patterns? These questions are survival tools. Thinking ahead reduces shock. Shock kills. Preparedness stabilizes. Children were not just offspring. They were future knowledge carriers. Investing in children meant investing in continuity. Teaching became formalized over time. Demonstration, imitation, correction. Young learned which plants heal, which stones fracture best, which animals to avoid. That accumulated knowledge compounded. Each generation started slightly ahead. That incremental advantage builds over millennia. Humans developed sophisticated emotional signaling. Empathy strengthens cooperation. Trust reduces internal conflict. Conflict wastes energy. Groups that fought internally fractured. Groups that resolved tension persisted. Emotional regulation, controlling anger, managing fear, stabilized communities. The ability to forgive, to negotiate, to form alliances. These are not soft traits. They are survival technologies. Without them, cooperation collapses. And without cooperation, extinction accelerates. The Toba volcanic eruption around 74,000 years ago may have reduced human populations dramatically. Climate shifts during ice ages reshaped ecosystems repeatedly. Each time, survival depended on adaptability, flexible diet, flexible shelter, flexible migration. Species that specialize too narrowly are vulnerable to sudden change. Humans remained generalists, omnivores, adaptive, curious. Generalists survive instability better than specialists. That principle saved us, the last hominids. Other human species existed alongside us. Neanderthals, Denisovans, others we barely know. They were intelligent, capable, adapted, but smaller populations, more isolated networks, less extensive social webs. When climate stress intensified, small populations collapsed faster. Numbers matter, network matters, adaptability matters. It was not strength that doomed them. It was fragility of scale. That same fragility threatened us repeatedly. But our networks expanded wider, our exchange systems broader. That margin made the difference. The thin line here is the
herd is
unsettling
moving closer.
truth. There
Yes,
was no
we must
moment
act now.
where humans
I will
won.
signal the others.
There was no
They
final
sense us.
battle,
Prepare.
no coronation, just gradual disappearance of others and survival of one lineage. If a few migrations failed, if a few droughts lasted longer, if alliances fractured at the wrong moment, we would be fossil fragments. The caves would still exist, the rivers would still flow, but another species might be asking how we vanished. What survived not claws, not fangs, not brute force. What survived was shared knowledge, curiosity, cooperation, planning, adaptability, emotional bonding, communication. These are invisible traits. They do not fossilize easily, but they determine survival. Why this matters now. The prehistoric world tried to erase us. Climate shifts, predators, disease, scarcity. We survived because we adapted faster than the threats. But that advantage depends on the same qualities today. Trust, cooperation, shared knowledge. If those fracture, fragility returns. Human survival has never been guaranteed. It still is not. We are descendants of millions of small victories, small choices, small risks, small acts of curiosity. Every ancestor survived something lethal. Every ancestor walked through terrain that wanted them gone. You exist because they did not give up, because they shared, because they learned, because they stayed together. The world did not make space for humanity. Humanity carved space into the world, slowly, painfully, collectively. And that collective advantage is still the only reason we are here. If humanity survived millions of years by staying connected, by sharing knowledge, by refusing to give up, then the question isn't how we survived back then. It's whether we still deserve to. If stories like this remind you how thin the line really is, how fragile survival has always been, subscribe to Human Origins, because human history was never simple, and it was never guaranteed. And if we forget that, we may not get another chance to relearn it.